White House Chief of Staff John Kelly is currently coming under fire for some questionable comments he recently made about undocumented immigrants. We have some video of what he said.
Let me step back and tell you that the vast majority of the people that move illegally into the United States are not bad people. They're not criminals, they're not MS-13. But they're also not people that would easily assimilate into the United States. They're overwhelmingly rural people. In the countries they come from, 4th, 5th, 6th grade educations are kind of the norm. They're coming here for a reason, and I sympathize with the reason. But the laws are the laws.
So he said that. Now, there was an immediate reaction online. Chris Lewis, related to one of the former assistants to Barack Obama, said, White House Chief of Staff John Kelly says that immigrants from rural areas without English skills don't integrate into the US. My dad came from rural China and spoke little English. He raised a son, he was actually the assistant. He raised a son who held the same rank in the Obama White House, assistant to the president, that Kelly holds. I'd say we did okay. And we could all provide how many examples of people who come, who thankfully are not stopped and separated from their families, and then integrate quite well, and in some cases create some of the largest industries in our country. By the way, this is part of a pattern. During a meeting with lawmakers on Capitol Hill, Kelly reportedly said that some young undocumented immigrants who are eligible to sign up for DACA benefits are, quote, too lazy to get off their asses and enroll.
I don't know. I feel like if I were a potential DACA recipient, I would be a little hesitant about applying for any protection in the US. Simply because you don't know who the next president's gonna be and what kind of crazy behavior you're gonna have to deal with.
Yeah, if Trump's next re-election campaign is based on the purge.
Yep. Can I make a quick comment on, so Kelly said they're overwhelmingly rural people. As a negative thing about people coming to this country, the United States is made up of overwhelmingly rural people.
Who vote Republican.
Yeah, exactly. It's the weirdest kind of commentary to have on people trying to come join other overwhelmingly rural people.
By the way, another point, I hadn't thought of it that way, is Trump voters were generally less educated than non-Trump voters. So they're spitting in the eye of the same demographic, but from a different country. Now, of course, Trump voters don't see it that way. They're like, what do you mean? We're superior. Those rural people are from a bad rural country, et cetera.
That doesn't have an opiate epidemic.
Like we do. But I'm gonna shock the world a little bit here and defend them partly, okay? So of course, I agree with the core of what you guys are saying, that it's not true that they don't integrate well, that he has no data for that, and in fact, the whole history of this country is very poor immigrants coming in and integrating well. But the rest of it is not, I don't know if that's what people are mad about, but I don't find it as offensive. First of all, we all agree that at least, he says, the vast majority are not criminals and bad people and they're not MS-13. That's actually almost a shot at Donald Trump, okay?
He did a great job.
That's our bar.
And, I know.
He doesn't think they're all rapists.
But you think Trump's not gonna get mad at that when he says the vast majority are not MS-13?
Oh, I think this is Kelly trying to get booted out of the White House.
Yeah, this is, no, I'm serious though. Donald Trump was demagogued over and over during the State of the Union and made it seem like almost all the immigrants were MS-13. So when Kelly says that, that'll probably make Trump angry. He'll look at this and say not nearly harsh enough. But the middle there is, a lot of folks coming into the country, the overwhelming majority of the folks coming into the country crossing the border illegally are poor. I'm sure a lot of them do come from rural areas. A lot of them don't have great education. Now, that doesn't make me think that they can't integrate and that they wouldn't be great Americans, but that part is true. And there is a right way to say that and a wrong way to say that. So pointing out those facts, for example, a lot of the Turks, and again, just so that it's about me and you see, I'm trying not to be biased here, a lot of Turks that immigrate into Germany are more rural, right? Turks that immigrate to the US are not, but so it just happens to be that that's the demographic that could reach Germany. And they do have a little bit more trouble integrating because in order to be able to come to the US, you usually have to have an education, not always, but usually if you're coming from Turkey. And so we speak English better, have an education, it makes it a little easier to integrate. When Turks go to Germany, it does take longer for them to learn the language, and they're a little bit more set in their ways because of the rural way that they grew up. It's true in rural areas in the US, as you point out, Jules, and in Turkey and Mexico, actually ironically tend to be more conservative, more fundamentalist, right? And so when you are conservative in that sense, it's harder for you to change your ways. So pointing those things out, to me, is not overly offensive. If he had done it in the way that Ann Coulter did, where she's like, oh, they're a bunch of peasants. Okay, no, that's not the right way to, and she does that to purposely mock them and deride them, etc. I didn't get that sense from John Kelly, but at the end of the day, the most important thing he says is, and hence we should be against them because they can't integrate, and that's just not true.
So I want to talk a little bit about integration and assimilation and what's meant by those words, because aside from what I think is obvious and should be done, which is learning English and following our laws, what does integration and assimilation mean, right? Because the sense that I get from the Trump administration and other right-wingers is you need to reject your culture. You're gonna come to America, you need to embrace American culture. But what is American culture? American culture consists of people from all over the world coming in and enriching our country with their culture. So like the word integration and assimilation, with the exception of the language and making sure that people follow our laws, it really turns me off because it's not what you would think it means. It's not, the simple things of, hey, you gotta follow our laws and learn our language. It's, we don't like your culture, it makes us uneasy, you need to be American.
It's
but what does
dog
it
whistle.
mean?
It's just a dog whistle.
Yeah, I
It's a language meant to make you start to think automatically in terms of a hierarchy.
That's exactly right.
And race.
Yes.
And certainly race, yeah.
And one other thing I want to add, I find it rich that the Trump administration and people who support Trump keep talking about immigrants learning the language when Trump himself doesn't have a firm grasp of English. So
I would like to test 10 random immigrants coming across the border, and I bet they have a better idea of when to capitalize words, what putting quotation marks around a word means, and why when you type something and then you realize you didn't really mean it, you can delete it rather than putting the opposite in parentheses.
I mean, well, look, my dad grew up in a rural area of Turkey, and of course didn't speak English when he was growing up. And when in fact, when he first came to America, he had a note that he would show people. Like, I don't know how to speak English. This is the address I'm trying to get to. And back then in the 1960s, America actually was a much more welcoming country and people helped him and they were incredibly generous and they got him to where he needed to be. And the stories of the generosity of Americans to my dad is unbelievable. It's wonderful. And we've gone so backwards. When I came to the country, I didn't speak a word of English. My dad taught me the sentence, I do not know how to speak English. And I would repeat that over and over again in school. But to John's point, I would argue that my English is slightly better than Donald Trump's now.
Yeah, I mean, their worry is that if you don't know the language coming in, I mean, come on, are you really gonna learn it? And admittedly, English is one of the hardest languages to learn, but look at Cenk, he was taught it and now we can't shut him up.
2 easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below, then you're a TYT subscriber. And second is ring the bell. And when you do that on YouTube, you're notified of our videos.